podcast. This is the live report. This is our second live Greysheet podcast report. And today, Patrick, Perez and I are welcoming some guests. So we're really excited. We've got a topic. We're going to talk about AI in the numismatic marketplace. We're also going to talk a little bit about, a market report. So we're going to start out with that. And then I'm going to introduce you to some great fellas. But I don't want to waste a lot of time introducing, things we've already discussed. So I'm just going to jump right in. So for starters, this week it's June the 5th, 2025. And a quick summary of the market today is that things are starting to slow down a little bit in the rare coin marketplace. The first quarter of the year, really January through May are very busy with shows. And then around June, we start to taper down a little bit. Thank goodness. We all need a breath. We've been on the road constantly at shows. So there's not as much activity after Central States until this gap around, the A&A show in the summer. So it's a great time to get introspective about how things have been going and so on. And we've talked about that a bit. The market today is especially resilient given the uncertainty of financial markets that we've seen. Although I feel like, and this is where Patrick's expertise comes in, things have slowed down a little bit too in that kind of craziness of the financial markets. But Patrick, you did have something you wanted to say about platinum bullion this week. What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, of course, first of all, hi, everyone. Great to be back. And so a lot of the talk this year has been about gold. I mean, gold's the crazy run, gold has been on, and silver to a lesser extent. So that's gotten a lot of the headlines. But just over the past 2 weeks, I mean, platinum has gone crazy, including today. It's like spiking today. It's up almost, last I looked, $40 today. And so, early April, platinum was flat for a long time. It really was just very range bound. And in early April, you were talking $880 an ounce. And today it's at $1140,
wow,
approaching $1150. So in a very short period of time. And again, it was just over the past, I would say 15 trading days where we've just seen this spike. So it's kind of like everyone's like, well, I'm priced out of gold and I don't want to buy silver because if I have a lot of money to spend, it's going to take up a lot of space. Let me jump to platinum. And because you would think industrial demand worldwide has kind of really slowed down because of concerns about things like tariffs. And there's a lot of industrial uses for platinum. So I don't think that's the driver. I think investors are just like, wow, let me look at something else because gold is so darn expensive. And
I find that to be, sorry. I found it to be really interesting because I've been watching platinum for the last year or so and saying, what happened? I mean, it completely disconnected from the gold boom, and then silver, I don't know, kind of flattened out, and it got itself to the 30s, and then it really didn't want to keep moving for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's interesting that platinum is now that driver.
And there's a heck of a lot less platinum coins laying around than gold. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah. And if people get, if collectors get hot on platinum, there's some incredible values. And I've been waiting for some years looking at platinum eagles and the proof eagles and the mintages. Yep. They were sort of unpopular at issue. So some of these coins, I mean, you can't find them if you're looking for them, but so far nobody really has taken a big interest.
Exactly.
So let me just jump over real quick and just talk about, the U.S. Mint released on, I guess it was June 5th, on May 20th, the U.S. Mint released the W Mint Mark Silver Eagles at $91 per. That's interesting, and I'm told by the wholesale department at Heritage that they're quite, in demand, let's say. So that's interesting. The U.S. Mint is becoming savvy to kind of short release items for that bring collector interest that are somehow easy for them to do without, let's say, legislation and things like that. So, tell us a little bit, Patrick. I mean, they got a whole host of these privy mark coins that are crazy.
Yeah, and it's funny, going back to you're talking with the market slowing down a little bit. Annually, year over year, the real driver of the market is modern coinage, which I think kind of gets overlooked by the average coin dealer who only worries about vintage stuff. But anyway, today's kind of cool because today, exactly today, the Mint released the W Mint Mark Gold Eagle, which to me used to be like the burnish. They used to call it burnish. Now they just call it the uncirculated Gold Eagle. But two things stuck out to me when I looked it up today. The mintage is only 7,500, which is really, really low in the context of most other US coins. And today, the release, it's nice being today because today we get to see the release price, and it's $4,170. So it's almost just a hair under 25% premium over melt today. So today gold's 33.50, 41.70. You're talking 24.5% premium. How that's received is, we'll see. But I just thought that mintage was really low.
Yeah, yeah. So really quickly, as a shameless plug on Silver Eagles, real quick, Patrick, you've got a book coming out that is the next edition of a really popular item.
Yes, exactly. So this will be the 5th edition. It's called The Guide to the U.S. American Silver Eagle Bullion Program, and it's been a book where there's always been involvement with the actual designers and mint directors of these coins as they've come out. So this 5th edition features some really cool stories from David Ryder, who actually has served 2 different terms as mint director. And then, of course, all updated through this year of all the new coins that have come out. So the last edition ended with the 2021 coins. And so now, we filled in all the rest of the years, relevant information, mintage information, everything you need to build an awesome collection of Silver Eagles.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really excited. John Marcanti's, book has just been fantastic in the past. And then, so the last thing about the U.S. Mint is releasing a Superman. So they can't issue it in a coin. That's a legislative problem. So they issue them as metals, but there's a gold Superman coin coming. I mean, people will act like this may or may not sell well, but I think this has got to be phenomenal. I mean, it's just got to be.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I do kind of involved in the comics world on the side, and I'm much more of a Marvel person than DC. But I shouldn't say that I'm shocked, but I'll use the word shocked that the rendition of Superman on the coin itself is actually quite good. I think they were pretty true to the original art, which was really nice to see that they didn't modify it to some other, genre, type. And yeah, so the gold coin is $50 denomination. And then the metals, the silver metals, 1 ounce, 2.5 ounce. I'm very curious what the silver metals are going to be priced at relative to spot. I think that's going to be an important factor of how they sell. And of course, the gold coin is going to be way over spot. So.
Well, I think you could start at $91 based on how they're pricing things at the moment. So let's see where that goes.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Let's switch really quickly to the next major coin show that's coming on the calendar. I teased it up. It was the ANA World's Fair of Money. I still have trouble remembering it that way, but I call it the ANA Summer Show, and this is actually going to be the first year I don't go, other than COVID, probably in 45 years or something like that. So I'm just going to say that I think the choice of Oklahoma City was not wise. And I mean, I hope I'm wrong for the sake of the ANA, but I've talked to a lot of dealers who are also thinking about not going because, the show is supposed to be populist and by nature, and I get it. They want to come to these different cities and bring it closer to everybody. But, Oklahoma City is not close to anybody. And, we're always, it sounds terrible, but bring it back to Chicago, go to Dallas, go to any of these big central cities, Denver, that we can all get to quite easily by plane. And so if it's not going to bring in a lot of people, then why should a lot of people go, right? I mean, how many collectors are in Oklahoma City? So I hope it's a good show, but I'm actually going to take a nice vacation that week, and I wish them the best of luck. Are you going, Patrick? Are you guys all going?
I'm going, obviously to represent the company, but also I have some volunteer work that I do with different organizations within the industry that require my attendance. But yeah, I mean, ANA has some, high points regardless of the location, that are in the context of who you see and stuff like that. But yeah, it's the selection of a city, I think, gets harder and harder as the years go by. But it's critically important to the not only the success of the show in the moment, but also the perception of the show.
Right. No, I agree. I hope it works out, and I hope you have a great time. And I think it's great if you can double down. So listen, we have a great set of panelists here today, and you guys have been really patient, and I appreciate that patience. So we're gonna shift gears now and get our panelists involved. But before I do, I just want to say a couple kind of public service announcements. Number one, I'm gonna kind of let the rest of the group do most of the talking, and I'll chip in a little bit because AI is not my strength. So I'm going to learn today with the rest of you, and I'm going to try to address questions that come in while y'all are talking. And then the other thing is, please, if you're enjoying this, please help us by subscribing to our channel and sharing the information with other people who you think might be interested in the long term. Because the more spirited we can make these conversations, then we have the potential to bring in lots of industry leaders and smart people and great young people like we have today. And so it's really just about getting people to follow and pay attention. So thanks again for watching, and thanks you guys for participating. And let's just jump into this conversation about artificial intelligence, which is an interesting topic, right? It's on everybody's mind. What does it mean? Does it make sense in numismatics? Does it make sense? Period. But either way, it's here to stay. And I think the next generation of folks, that they're really going to dictate what happens with this whole technology. So let me just introduce who's here with us today. So for starters, we have Jim Bucki, and Jim is a professor of computer science at Genesee Community College and a longtime numismatist with a deep passion for coin collecting. He's a dedicated member of the Buffalo Numismatic Association, where he shares his expertise through educational programs and written articles. Jim has written articles and blogs for us over at Greysheet for years. We love him, and Jim really helps us span the knowledge topics. Sometimes Patrick and I can kind of get too high and above, and Jim has been really great at expressing with some great articles and content for us. He also serves as the editor of the BNA newsletter, providing valuable platform for members to stay connected and informed. Jim, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Patrick, you introduce our next guest, since I stole your first one.
Yeah. So one thing I just want to also say to everyone in the chat, we will we'll jump in later on and answer some of your questions. So don't think we're not seeing them. We're definitely seeing them, and we'll do that. Next up, we have Ethan Opdahl. He's a 24-year-old who fell in love with coins at age 9 and has been immersed in numismatics ever since. Ethan brings a unique perspective on how this ancient hobby can evolve without losing its soul. He likes to focus on numismatic technology. He's based in Washington, D.C. He's looking forward to sharing his vision for the future of coin collecting and why he believes the best days for this hobby are still in front of us.
Awesome.
Great to be here.
We also have Nick Morabito. He's a 20-year-old who has been collecting since a very young age and dealing for the past 4 years. He's a fourth-year college student studying computer science and mathematics. Nick builds machine learning models and full-stack apps at the intersection of the rare coin industry and cutting-edge tech, and believes AI has many helpful applications in the world of coins. So welcome.
So Nick and Ethan are no coincidence that they're here together, because they're working on a startup in numismatics. Hopefully we'll hear a little bit about that in and around your conversation. But I met them only a few weeks ago, and they're really kind of at the cutting edge of what's going on here. So when we talked about this topic, I thought this would be great to have you guys on board. So Jim, why don't you let me as a topic, I have some topic lists here for AI. Jim, why don't you just start with us? Why don't you lead the conversation real quick? You're the professor, so let's hear what you have to, if you can lead us in.
Sure. When I saw this topic originally put out there, I thought, my mind's always jumping around on these things, and I sort of put together a list. And one of the first things that came out was the coin identification. And some people think it's really easy, but as you all know, there are some minor differences in a coin that could make a huge difference in the price. And that's why I thought, there's already some apps out there like who was it? Macton, Coinoscope. Some people use Google Lens, but I think we can do better than that.
Okay, Ethan, it's perfect tee up for you guys. You and Nick.
I know. I'll start it off here, Nick, and then I'll pass it to you. I completely agree with that. Right? There's so many options out there right now in terms of coin identification. but there's a huge difference between coin identification from the perspective of a non-numismatist and the level of coin identification that's necessary for people who interact with the numismatics every day. Nick, I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, 100%. I know the coin identification apps have been as helpful as they are harmful. You have people scanning coins in and getting bad readings and calling coin shops all day long. I've certainly dealt with that, and yeah, I think there's a lot of good that can be done if it's done correctly, and there's a lot of bad too. So we have to be really, really careful and really precise in what we're building, and this can work all the way down to even the most complicated things like overtins, like Sheldon varieties. I've talked to a few people who have tried to build models to identify Sheldon varieties, identify overtins, and it does work. And you always have to look at it after you run it through the model just to make sure it's correct. But there's a lot of ways you can use this identification to speed up the whole process. And then on the flip side, when it comes to inventory, you can build a model that can look at an image, it can classify everything, fill in all the categories, and post that listing for you. And that's what Ethan and I have been building for the past couple of weeks. We've been putting our time into these convenience features for coin dealers.
Yeah, and the other,
I'm sorry. Let me just ask you a quick question. Is that AI or is that just good programming? I mean, what's the difference?
Well, AI is a very broad term. So AI encompasses statistics, machine learning, anything. But yes, it is AI. And we are using machine learning models that are pre-trained to basically take the text off a slab and print it out, right? And then from there, we can run it through a language model. And what that does is it extracts, the nearest, most likely categories, for, let's say, the denomination, the year, all these things, based on the images that you put in. And over time, it gets better and better. Part of it is just straight up prompt engineering. The other part is creating a model that can detect text, detect barcode, things like that, and actually use those effectively versus just having a wall of text and not knowing what to do with it. So there certainly is true AI happening and true cutting edge AI that wasn't possible just 3 years ago. We didn't have things like OpenAI. We had less advanced text models. So these days you can do a lot of things that you could not do just 5 years ago, let's say.
I think something like that will also help attract new collectors because, of course, what's the new collector's favorite question? What is it and how much is it worth? And a tool like that could actually help bring in those new collectors and also help ensure that they don't start off bad and, with pay too much for a coin or they buy the wrong coin, things like that. So I think there's a lot of potential in growing this hobby with that.
And I'll just jump in that I think an area that's really overlooked as the paper money guy is identifying foreign notes that don't have any English on them. Now, most people if you put a Japanese note, a Chinese note, and a Korean note in front of me, I'll know which one is which right away. But the average guy in a coin shop could have no clue. He doesn't know what kanji looks like. He doesn't even know where to start in the catalog in the book. So AI or image recognition for paper money and even foreign coins, it might have Cyrillic letters instead of English lettering. All that type of stuff I think will help you get there really fast. And that's identifying foreign objects that are non-English, I think, is a really important aspect of any identifying program.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Oh,
Nick.
sorry, go ahead. Okay, I was going to say the great thing about that is we have a huge wealth of knowledge that have been built by collectors for decades, centuries. We have the images, we have the data, and nowadays we have the tech where we can actually build these identification models. We can build banknote. You can scan a banknote, it can translate it, it can tell you everything about it in seconds. And 10 years ago or 20 years ago, you would have to leaf through a book, the Cyrillic, try to match the letters. And, it takes 10, 20 times longer. Nowadays, we can just use the data we have. We can use scans of old books. We can do all those things. And we can do so much more than just identification. We can trace back provenances. We can look at the auction history of a coin for the past 200 years, just based on scans and little leaflets that have been assembled over the past couple centuries. I don't know if there's a website, and I'm blanking on the name right now. I want to say, okay, it's called Coin Cabinet. And what they do is you can take a picture of a coin that you have in your collection, and it will match it to all the possible provenances. So let's say I have a raw ancient coin, I snap a photo of it, it'll say, here are the top matches. And you can click one and it'll show the provenance, it'll show the history of the coin. And that was not possible 10 years ago. It wasn't even possible 5 years ago. So there are these cutting edge tools that are, in my opinion, underutilized and are extremely powerful in finding the history of even singular coins. So.
Let me ask a quick question. When we talk about identification, I mean, I have still yet to find, and it's not that I've searched every day, but I have not seen a good app that if I scan a Lincoln penny, that it knows this is the 1955 S penny or something like that. It just says, it matches it to any Lincoln penny or any Memorial Cent Lincoln penny. So we're not even yet matching to year. And so my real question, because you touched on varieties and things like that, is, and can we tell if it's an Overton 108 or a 109 or a 109A based on, really, can we go that deep with this varietization, in your opinion?
Yes. Well, yes and no. If you want to scan every coin in the universe with one model and try to figure out the Overton variety of a $50 versus a Sheldon variety of an 1801 large cent or something, you're not going to be able to package that into one giant model. But what you can do is you can train generalized models, which can identify denomination type. You can then train submodels, which are less powerful, but they can detect little things like the date, the mint mark. And then from there, if you have rare coins with little die cracks and small differences in die states, you can do that. You can actually, if you have the right images to train it on, you absolutely can train it. The answer is yes. But to package it all up in one expensive model, put in an app, it's tough. It can be done, but it's tricky. It's expensive. So that's why you don't see these extremely advanced models being offered to the public.
Well, I mean, look, if you're a grading service, let's say, and all of a sudden every coin that comes in, or certainly every banknote that comes in, I've talked to Patrick about this. We have 8 million images in the databases, of our catalog of U.S. and world paper money and coins. So we basically know what almost every banknote looks like. So you should be able to scan that very quickly, match it to a note, written in any language, and I feel like biggest problem at a grading service for paper money is how do you staff a group of people? There's not enough people who are really expertise in grading such things, so you can't have them identifying banknotes coming in at $15 a submission. So the software should be able to do that. And then likewise, and that would be good for quality control, like slabbed out the door. How many mistakes do we see in world paper, for example? Should be able to scan everything going out the door and say, this is not a BNB 112 or something like that. So that would be quite interesting. And the same is true, of course, for coins. If you could do, varietization on every coin coming in based on this rich image library we have. We just haven't figured out yet how to affordably do what you're saying, Nick. So we'll do that question offline, because I would love for you to help us with that.
Of course, be happy to.
I think, John, the biggest thing you're bringing up here, which I completely agree with, is there's the part of numismatics that is just a slog, right? It's identification when things come in the door before they get graded. It's taking a coin from over the counter, inventorying it, identifying it, pricing it, etc. There's the pieces of this industry that we all know and love, which is just looking through coins and currency and enjoying them and using that extra nuance that only a human can have. But at the same time, probably 90% of the grading teams, the coin dealing teams, etc., is spent on these things that are very manual and frankly a little bit annoying. And I think really that's where technology has the opportunity to be accretive. So it's not really sucking out the soul of what we love about coins. It's more or less allowing us to focus 90% of our time on what's currently only getting 1% of our time.
Having installed my first computer system back in 1982, what I've learned over all those years is, as Ethan was saying, it's going to be a tool to make us more efficient. We're never going to remove the human judgment, the human interaction from it, but it can help us make us more efficient.
Yeah, and I think on that, it's a good transition to go from identification to things like authentication and grading, because that's the next step, right? You identify something, then the next question is it real? And then the next question after that, okay, it's real, what's the grade? So if anyone wants to jump in on the reality of using AI to authenticate.
Oh,
Nobody better than Nick for this.
I've been looking at this for about a year now. I've been working on AI grading, and the way I've been tackling it is I've been using the largest possible image libraries that I can find. So there are some great public resources that are out there. I'm not going to devolve any information, but right now I've been training the models based on images that are publicly available, and it's actually surprisingly effective. And of course, there are limitations because there are all kinds of surface issues that you can't see in an image. Just even at the simplest level with cleaning, with slide marks, things like that, they don't always show up on camera. So I think, without going into the details, I think the future of AI in grading is closer to finalization versus actual true, like, let me put a vintage coin into a machine and get out a grade like XF47 or something, and then I look at it and round it. I don't think that's the future of it, even though that's really, really cool and really fun. The future of it really is just having a finalizer. You can look at a coin and say, hey, you missed this issue, you missed this scratch. This coin has rub. Why is it in a 67 holder? Versus, just running coins through a machine. I think also that a lot of talent is wasted on grading modern coins because you're looking at 69s and 70s. You're looking for little flecks and little dots, and it's like, to me, that's a huge waste of time because there aren't many people who can grade, and of course, there are people in modern who are learning how to grade and are getting better at it. But the more resources we can allocate towards vintage and towards world, and sort of freeing up these backlogs, the better our industry will be and the happier the average consumer will be. So I think that's really where the focus should be. That's where the money should be, is speeding up these bulk processes and just kind of checking for errors and things like that.
I think the other thing too is got to keep in mind, and we keep talking about images and cameras. AI can also take input from other things such as the weight of the coin, measurements of the coin. And when you go through the airport, they have that swab thing that they wipe around and then they put it into the sensor to see if there's any explosive detectors. I don't know if there's something out there that could be used for coins that could detect a surface, bondo or something that's out there, at least to raise a red flag so the grader could say, oh, let me look closer at that.
PCGS over a decade ago invented something they called the sniffer, which I don't know, we were told would be able to see things or sniff or whatever, recognize such things. And then they pulled the plug on that. So I don't know why that never went forward. And I'm looking through the comments. There's a lot of people commenting here about, one person commented about, how they, I think Kent Kiker mentions, he says, I think AI can help bridge the uncertainty risk of purchasing raw coins, for sure, and should also help really quickly detect a counterfeit from a visual image, especially a lot of these contemporary Chinese counterfeits. A human being with a naked eye can say that's definitely not real. So our a good learned system should do it. But I just want to say, Kent also mentioned one other thing. I wanted to find it. He says, I think the AI will compress margins for dealers as it closes the knowledge gap. And, this is an age-old conversation in numismatics. It's like, I hear it all the time. If Greysheet sells the Greysheet wholesale pricing to collectors, we're hurting the market. Giving information to people is somehow bad for the market. I absolutely disagree with the question for the same reason. The more transparency we can give our marketplace, the more knowledge, the more likelihood that you can take the time to go through your grandparents' coins, and then wow, all of a sudden you have a Hot Lips Morgan dollar where you would have thought it was a $25 coin otherwise. That's good for you. That's going to make you a collector. You're going to now get involved in our hobby. You'll go on eBay and sell it, hopefully. So I don't think it'll compress margins. I think that transparency is good for margins. And I'm also seeing a number of people talk about, the grading, the mentioning about the regrading of coins for, like, does AI hurt, this part of the market? And, again, Nick's eye rolling, I'm eye rolling. I don't want anybody regrading coins. I don't believe in it. I think it's insidious to the market, that, nobody really knows who gets treated the best in that world, right? Is it the luck of the draw that you took your float MS66 potential coin, and it was in a 65 holder, but then it came back in a 64, but if you know what you're doing, you submit it 15 times, it comes back in a 66. I think this is gaming the system, and I don't think gaming the system is good in the long run for numismatics. So I'm against all of those things, and everything that we're saying then is positive for this market. And I want to leave the group with a question real quick. We haven't talked, I don't think, about pricing, and maybe Patrick, you can answer this a little bit, but we haven't talked about how AI can help pricing. And Patrick and I, it's a very manual process. We use a lot of tools, they're not AI, to do formulas, and we'll say, hey, 0.9607 ounces of gold in a $20 gold piece. So therefore, it should never be worth less than melt, right? So we know that they peg at melt and they move. Maybe it's $100 better date. Maybe it's an MS63, so it's worth $200 more. But we're not using AI. And we need AI, Patrick and I, to get to price world paper money, world coins. There's too much. It's not, there isn't the human power for this. So let me toss that to you.
Yeah. And before we jump to that, I do have one question for Nick, but you have to keep the answer short. When you talk about grading and surface quality, has anyone ever, there's these programs now that will show everyone, when you learn how to grade the first time, what are you taught? Tilt the coin. And now we have things like Coins in Motion. Stacks Bowers has one. David Lawrence for Coins has one where it's moving the coin around. And can you teach a model to look at a coin in different angles and see the surface quality?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, if I had to build a strictly image-based model, what I would do is I would find 6 angles or so where I could snap individual photos, because you're really not going to miss any scratches. You're not going to miss any cleaning marks. And if you can take a photo 6 times at 6 different lighting positions, you can probably get 99.9% of the information you need to make an educated guess. But I think you need to go a step further when it comes to things like authentication, because if you're running a coin through an authenticator, you don't want to mess up. So from there, you might need an XRF. You might need some XRF data. You might need some surface data from like 3D scans. And the technology is absolutely there. It's not too expensive. An XRF machine is in the low 5 figures. And if you're running 10,000 coins through it a day, it makes sense to buy one. So I think there's a lot of technology out there that you can use to, and I like what Jim said about weighing a coin, looking at the surface quality, things like that, where you don't just have to rely on images and the data from light. You can actually look at other things.
Great. Awesome. So
the other thing about grading that I think is going to play into this is, all right, I've been around like forever. I think I'm older than all of you guys, and grading standards have changed over the years. And so you got a holder, and if it's an old rattler, that coin may grade differently than it is today. Or even things with authentication, that coins that we once thought were a micro O, all right, now we know they were counterfeits or something. So that is also going to change and has to be integrated into our AI models.
Well, I think AI will stop that completely, but we'll just jump into pricing. There's one of the most difficult things, and I'll just preface it with this. One of the most difficult things to explain to a novice collector is, why does the same coin and the same grade sell for up to $1,000 difference? They say, oh, well, we spin it all different types of ways in the industry, right? Oh, well, this one's not graded by the right company, or, oh, this one, it was overgraded. And the average new buyer doesn't understand that. So using a combination of AI, image, and grading, even internally, even if you're not a grading service, to filter and categorize pricing, and then have a human eye look at it, I think is kind of what I would start with. But you guys feel free to jump in.
I just feel like you see across the board, not just in numismatics, but in every industry right now, AI is getting incredibly good at handling a lot of the tasks that used to be either manual for people who really know what they're doing, or take a long time for people who are lower in the organization. And I think where we're going right now, exactly to what you said, Patrick, is that AI can do a whole lot of the work, from identifying the item to understanding how that item's been priced currently on the market, how historicals have been trending, and then allowing somebody to really come in and finalize that opinion. But the first 95% of the effort, they don't need to be involved in. And I think at the end of the day, like that extra 5% sprinkle on top is really, what we're here for. And especially when you get to the higher levels of this industry, it really allows people to move faster and probably make better decisions in a shorter period of time.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is, of course, any AI model is only as good as the data you feed into it. But I think AI, in maybe years from now, as this model is being built, can take into account external factors and also maybe even start to predict the price of or the prices or values of where they're going. Economic uncertainty, layout of the land, what's happening in the world, wars, who's buying, what major government is buying gold by the ton, okay, or things like that, or just economic, what do they call it? With the people believe that the economy's good.
Sentiment.
Absolutely. Yes, I 100% agree. I think it's actually a very exciting field that hasn't been explored as much as it could be. I know there are people who have tried to use AI to price coins. And of course, at the end of the day, you can make as many predictions as you want. You can have a perfect model and be wrong. So with coins, they're so variable that, you have a lot of factors. You're not just looking at the numbers on the slab. You're looking at the quality of the coin. You're looking at things like potential upgrades, all that stuff. And, as we build models that can grade, models that can price, models that can do attribution, eventually there will be sort of a convergence where you have a model that can take a coin, attribute it, look at the quality of the coin, and then price it after. And I think that's sort of the end all be all. That's where people really want to be. And when we're there, then there's no information asymmetry. The dealers and the consumers have the same information. And then suddenly the industry gets a lot more honest. And I know there are a lot of people who are scared of that. And, I have to tread lightly when I work on these kinds of things because there are people whose livelihood depends on flipping coins and, taking advantage of a 3% spread in Bullion. And I think there's a lot of work that goes into it. So, we have to be careful. But I think pricing is a really exciting place to be. And I know, John, you are working on machine learning. I'm sure that's a big focus of yours. And I think there's a lot of progress that can be made. If we can look at things like metals futures, things like that, sentiment analysis. You can scan through tons of Twitter, all that stuff, and you can see, well, people are buying gold. People are excited about gold. We can maybe pick up more, double row box of 20 libs or something because the sentiment's great, and maybe we'll get a $50 premium in a month. And I think if we can identify information like that, we can make good plays and be informed.
Nick, to your point, I mean, I don't know that there's any fear of growing this market. The more honest we make this market, the more it grows. And we were talking about platinum earlier, and the point is, these coins are so scarce that demand drives their value, right? And it's not about overcharging people. I mean, Greysheet has always been about informing people, right? Whether collectors, dealers, keeping everybody informed. But if you have 10 customers looking for coins, you'll pay more for coins, and then they will have to pay you a little more because you make a living. The problem that we have in the market is, if there is a problem, and I don't think that there is a huge one, is just growth, right? We want our market to grow in terms of collectors, and giving people more information should grow that hobby, and therefore values will increase. And knowledge will never be really replaceable. You'll still always need a great coin dealer who can advise you about how things work. Let me move on to a couple questions that we got on a field. Could eBay, this is Jeff Garrett. Jeff, really appreciate you coming online with us. Could eBay and other online sellers use AI to filter fakes? Yes, in a heartbeat. And these guys will talk to you all day long. The problem that eBay has today, and I talked to the folks at eBay for over 12 years. I've been in conversations with every category manager over a decade. And I keep impressing on them the need for them to have structured data. They don't know what you're listing. So if you sell an iPhone on eBay, they know what model, what serial number. They know that you're listing something that shouldn't be listed, whether it's a stolen phone or it's an iPhone 5 SE blue, whatever. They know what it is. They don't know that your 1927 Buffalo nickel is really a 1927 Buffalo nickel. You could put an Indian cent in there, call it a 1927 Buffalo. and I tell them there's so many reasons why they have to change this, including the fact that among the biggest cases of fraud on eBay is when someone sells counterfeit silver eagles below melt. So the counterfeiters originally would sell them for $5. These are made out of lead or something. So they're selling a $30 silver eagle for $5. Well, that's a no-brainer. But what about selling a $33 silver eagle for $27? Everybody in the country will pay silver melt for it. So it shouldn't be allowed on eBay at $1 below melt or $2, because we know there's something wrong with that. And they don't know that yet. They don't know how to do that. Excuse me. So this is a big issue, and they could also detect counterfeits if we could get the AI visualization that we're all talking about. Quick identification from pictures. We know your $1804 is counterfeit. First of all, it looks like it's got chocolate in it, and it can't be real anyway. So Jeff, thanks for the question. Miss Numismatist asked, there's these already coin snap is like everybody, even my friends in the playing tennis with me want to know why they have a rare coin because they scanned it on coin snap and it was worth it's a 1980 Lincoln cent and it's worth $1,000. We want to get there, but we have Patrick and I have tried some visualization models and we didn't like where it went, and I think we're getting to the point now where we should be the company doing something like that, and of course we have the pricing. But I want you to know, and it turns out, if the coin's rotated, it's a problem for these early models we were using. I want you to know it's a 1992 D Lincoln cent and that it's worth 1 cent. I want to know what it is. I don't want you to think it's something else. It'd be great if it was a 1972 double die. That'd be even more fun. But so thank you for that question. And Z-Man asked about why aren't the grading services doing this? And we don't know what the grading services are doing. I would assume they are. And if they're not, they'll probably call Nick and Ethan tomorrow and ask them for some help. But this is all going very, very fast. And one other person mentioned, they said, AI is only as good as the programmer behind it. That's something else. Again, AI novice right here. But that's something else that's not really true. It's only as good as the person who's querying it, yes, or building a program around it. But the AI is like smarter than all of us in a certain way. You just have to, really know how this thing works and how to extract its best and to stay away from its worst.
Yeah, a lot of times AI is a black box. We don't really know what's happening. Even though we know the architecture, we know the shape of the model, we don't always know exactly what patterns it's learning. Even in grading, with I'm building simple models, and I go through the layers, and I'm thinking, why is it looking at the bust half dollar in this most random spot? But it's learned that it can grade off a small portion of the coin. There are little things that we don't know that actually make these AI models better than us. And I like what you said earlier about an AI model being as good as the data you give it, because that's absolutely true. An AI model is going to look at your data, and in theory, it's going to find the best fit for that data. So if I feed in a bunch of Morgan dollars and I give it all the grades, the model is only going to be as good as the image quality, the accuracy of the grades, all these factors. It's never going to be better, and it can absolutely be worse. But yeah, so what you said about it being as good as the data makes sense. The programmer, I could be a horrible programmer, but I could just happen to make a really good model that happens to generalize images really well, and it turns out that it's actually going to be better than me. So.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is we're going to see that happen. I mean, you take a look back when, in the early or late 1990s, okay, Google search engines were just coming on, and I think the key difference there is, Google just looked for stuff and gave it to you, all right? And with AI, as you just said, it'll look for the best fit, not the correct fit. The best fit. I think we will get to the correct fit eventually as this data model builds and it gets more input, things like that. So as I refer to it in my classes, AI actually right now stands for almost intelligent.
Well, I mean, that's a good start. Does anybody else want to jump in with any other topics? I think we've nailed it. There's obviously a lot more we can get into, and I think the next phase, is really how good can this be? And we are at the beginning of it in terms of, like I said, determining dye varieties. And we didn't mention, to my mind, let me ask you this really quick, Nick and Ethan. Does toning affect the ability for grading in an AI sense? I always felt like, let's say, toning really messes it up. They can't, that a system like that can't really make sense of it.
Well, surprisingly, no. So if you like I said before, if you have enough data, it'll learn to ignore toning. It might give, so it's obviously natural that a grader is going to give a coin a boost if it has crazy neon colors, and models will learn that, and it will predict that a coin with crazy colors is going to have a crazy grade. But most of the time, it's going to be true to the technical grade, and it's going to ignore average toning, ugly toning, mottled toning. It can even reduce the grade. If you have a 63 that's all brown, it might call it 2. So yes, with enough data, you can bypass the whole toning issue. You can bypass even like fraudulent color bumps when you have bad color. I know there are people who have built models that can actually predict if color is natural or versus unnatural. It could look at if the color's good or bad or ugly. So all these things are very trainable. But at the end of the day, if you have a beautiful rainbow toned coin, you really do want a real grader to look at it, and you shouldn't trust AI. And in the case of a Silver Eagle, if you have a toning spot, it shouldn't be a 70.
Yeah, but what about a dirty, ugly Morgan Dollar
Yeah.
or just a choice original one? I mean, it just doesn't it look to an AI model like a scratch? Or are you doing surface level?
I mean, obviously it's a spectrum. If I put like a line, I took a Sharpie and drew a line on a coin. It's not natural. The model's never seen that before. It's going to net it down, right? It's going to call it a few grades lower. But if a coin has a toning splotch that's visible on 10 other coins in the data set, then the model's going to say, hey, we've seen this before. This isn't horribly detractive to the grade. And, we'll grade it accordingly. And if it's ugly, it'll take it down. If it's pretty, it'll bring it up. And all that stuff is trainable. What I like to say, and this is a dangerous thing to say, but is if a human can do it, then AI can do it. So if you can see through toning and tell that it's real, then the AI can do that as well, and it can probably do it better than you. So
And tell that it's real. That is the
tell
key
that's
thing.
real. Yeah. I've scrolled through Facebook too many times, seeing people complaining about NGC calling their coins artificial toning, and then you see a picture of it and it's horrible. And it's like, guys, the graders know that's fake. Just because you don't know doesn't mean the graders don't know. And so I think having AI is actually good in that context.
I will say I had a stack of coins and a whole bunch of Mexican coins and an old cardboard album that were all rainbow, and they all came back AT. And they were just in that holder for 10 years. But anyway, something that Jim said really got my mind going in the meantime, where you talk about predictive pricing. So everyone knows in the equity markets, 90% of the stocks are just traded by robots who spend the entire day scanning the headlines in the Bloomberg terminal, and that's all the macro information, right? And everything's traded that way. So if you built something that took price data from the numismatic business, every auction that happens around the world, plus all that macro data combined, if you had a gambling streak, you could really take some positions on coins and see what happens. And I think that could be that'd be really fun for someone if they, a private guy or a group, a syndicate, whatever, got together and built something like that using AI to gather just that much data from both things that have been historically connected but not connected, if that makes any sense, and really play in the market. And that would be interesting, because if there was a couple of people like that, coins would get scarce really quick.
I feel like that's where you need more people in our market, right? Our small little ecosystem isn't really robust enough for people to start taking positions on Platinum Eagles this week or 1877 Indian cents in VF based on macroeconomic data. But if we had a fivefold increase in collectors, and maybe this is true in cards and and things in sports cards where there is a much larger base, that those factors can be real. We do know, Patrick, you and I, that's what I know what you're getting at, is that especially on 7-figure coins or so on, or 6- and 7-figure coins, the macro numbers matter to the confidence of people who buy such rarities and want to spend $1 million or $2 million on a coin could affect that, or even 100,000. But largely, most of the coins we price are kind of spot based, or they're inexpensive, like Cirque V nickels and so on. But all of this stuff has really good potential, and I think shining the light and getting, again, we are always going to be an agent of transparency. You will never convince me otherwise at Greysheet to. We want to get our information. We want to educate the consumer as much as humanly possible, and to the extent that we can benefit from having AI tech help us with that and help give collectors confidence that they're not, being taken advantage of. I think it's fantastic. I think it's fantastic.
John, I think something that you bring up here that's really important is this essence of the amount of information in the market. I think what we're dealing with right now, to an extent, is that people are able to make 2x margin, right, when there is informational asymmetry across the buyer and the seller. But when you look at the big companies, that have come into industries over time, it's not the company that's making a 2x margin due to informational asymmetry. It's the company that is, making a huge market with informational symmetry, and just charging a fair price and making a lot of money. Like you see Walmart, right? Like Walmart got huge. Everybody knew they were getting a good deal. Everybody knew all the information, and it grew incredibly well. And I think when you make the point about what our market looks like, I mean, it's a large market. We all love it, but it's relatively small in the scope of things. Once you get a larger market, Patrick, what you're saying becomes a lot more possible, where you can look at these macroeconomic trends, and there's just that movement, that volatility in terms of the number of transactions on the buy side and the sell side to allow for that information to be valuable. Right now, I think when it's trading between people relatively slowly in a relatively small market, being able to have that edge with such a high amount of data is possible, but it's probably not as advantageous as it could be if we're able to grow it. And I think AI has the potential to really, really drive that forward.
Yeah, and my mind goes to, if you're talking about asymmetry or arbitrage, like how many people in America pay attention to all the auctions that happen in all the other countries in the world? It's if you could aggregate that data quickly, that's where it becomes like a truly global market where coins are flying around the world all the time. Because I mean, I've done it. I know people that have done it. You look at some obscure auction in Czech Republic or Germany, and you're like, wow, this coin, I can buy these coins and flip them in America super fast, or France, whatever it is, because the material is just not available here, and there's tons of it there, and whatever it may be, or this economy is not as strong, or all these different factors that the trading volume would increase tremendously if that information was accessible quickly, fast, before and after the sale.
That's a great point. Location is huge. And I think we have to play into the fact that coins are physical, and we can't necessarily look at them in the same lens as a future contract or something. We have to actually think of the fact that a coin trading in Hong Kong might trade for a different number than it would in the US. A group of tallers might trade for $100 a piece in Germany, and here they would sell for $250. So, this information is important, and it's a little bit different from any other industry where you might see gold trading within $1 here versus Saudi Arabia or something. So I think that's huge. But John, what you said about the number of collectors being the biggest factor on price, I think that's absolutely the case, especially when it comes to these super high upper 6-figure, lower 7-figure coins, where it really just comes down to, do you have 3 or 4 collectors bidding on it, right? And that can be a $500,000 difference. So having that information is really important, but also growing the amount of people who are willing to buy these coins, convincing large hedge funds and investment groups that coins are, a good investment, even though you're not supposed to say that, can increase the number of people who are actually buying coins and can actually support even the lower ends of the industry. Where less people are buying coins, but there's a lot more to go around. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest factor, and growing the information that's out there is the best way to do it. So I'm all for it, and I think people understand that's the best way to go forward.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, this was really cool. Thanks everyone for your participation. John, thanks for guiding the ship. And again, thank you everyone for watching and for the comments. Really awesome. Please remember to subscribe. We definitely have a plan to make this a regular thing. So if you like it, we'll keep jamming on it, and we'll keep growing it just like we hope to keep growing the market. So, John, if you got
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. And if anybody wants to send us an email with a potential topic for a future market report, we're happy to do it. And really, let's give a shout out to Billy Blattle, who is our moderator and doesn't want to be on screen. But Billy, this doesn't happen without you. So thanks a lot for making this happen and helping spread the word. Like I said, let's try to get this pretty technical stuff. It's not for everybody. We're not trying to get 1 million views. We'd rather have a small number of really strong advocates for the market. So thank you again for coming, guys. We look forward. We'll definitely invite you back for future podcasts, especially as we figure it all out. Maybe we'll have an AI engine set up the meetings in the future, so it won't be so much work. But thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.